We would like to thank the sponsors that made this event possible: the City of Iowa City, the University of Iowa, the Iowa City Public Library, Prairie Lights, Iowa Public Radio, the Graduate Hotel, and Think Iowa City. Between events, please be sure to visit the book fair at Merge right next door to the public library on the Ped Mall. There you can visit with publishers and authors. The vast majority of book festival events are offered without charge, but they are not free. So your financial support gives us the ability to offer programs like this festival. Please consider donating to the City of Literature by visiting iowicitybookfestival.org and clicking on Support, or scan the QR code on the back of your festival program. Today we will hear from author Cristalle Bowen. Cristalle Bowen, also known as Psalm 1, has been consistently named one of the nation's best artists by the Chicago Tribune, and in 2011 made her television debut on MTV's Emmy-winning series Made. She is an international touring and recording artist, featured in publications such as Vice, Forbes, and The Fader. An artist cut from Chicago's vast and unique hip-hop talent, Psalm has commanded stages of festivals from Paid Dues to Riot Fest. Not just an MC, Psalm has also been road DJ for rap legends. More than an entertainer, Cristalle is also an activist, scholar, and teaching artist. Today, we will hear her speak about her new memoir, Her Word is Bond. Everyone, welcome Cristalle Bowen.
Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? I see a couple familiar faces in here and a couple people that I've never met before, so that's a good mix. I am going to read a chapter from my book and take some questions. I'd love to hear from people who have possibly read a little bit of it, and then I'll also love to answer some questions, anything that y'all might have. So without further ado, I'm going to read Chapter 6, My Bio is Chemistry. Heterosexual men stop being nice about 2 weeks into a tour leg. If they're getting laid, they're being very graphic about these details and trying to figure out how to get more laid. And if they're not getting laid, watch out. Everything is coming up pussy. Yo, what time is it? Pussy time. What city are we headed to? Pussyville. How many CDs did you sell last night? Pussy 5. If these spaces were safe, these sentiments could theoretically be comical. I have a nasty little mind and I love a nasty little joke, but as I get older, I wonder about who's benefiting and who's getting violated by these ha-ha, boys will be boys moments. How safe is a space when the token woman is pretty much constantly exposed to the creepy, verbal side of rape culture? Being that woman on every early tour wasn't ideal, but it did teach me a lot about the male rapper psyche. Most feel entitled to women's bodies, especially if the women were at a rap show. In a lot of minds, if a woman had the balls to show up at an underground hip-hop show, she'd better be prepared for all this dick talk. Most rappers will go their whole careers without ever sharing a tour vehicle with a woman artist. I've been touring for well over a decade now, and on 98% of the tours, I wasn't only just the lone woman, but the first woman many of these guys had toured with. As recently as 2018, I was on tour and a dude had a nerve to exclaim, "I don't like touring with females because we can't say what we want to say." I begged him to speak his mind. He had a very weak, very incel-like mind. The president of a label I'll be discussing a lot in this book is infamous for allegedly saying women don't belong in rap or on tour. We can all make educated guesses as to why anyone would say something like that. More to the point, many rappers only invite women to their tour vehicle if they're fucking. So, as you can probably imagine, I've spent more than a few uncomfortable hours traveling in cramped spaces with varying levels of creepy dudes. I blocked out a lot of the sex talk. That's what headphones are for. And weed. It's wild to me to know some of the dudes I've shared vehicles and stages with have even been accused of rape. I was spared the sexually violent side of hip-hop on tour, but I was exposed to the sentiment. I won't say all the men I've toured with have been disgusting, only a portion, but oh my God, what a portion. Britney Spears toxic, rap ain't got no conscience. Fuck them in they boys club, TLC, yeah, no scrubs. Really weird prophets. Rap is Britney Spears toxic, from the song Britney Spears. You truly find out so much about people when you travel with them. I've developed some of my closest friendships with men by touring with them. Wonderful, insightful, nonviolent men. And I can say with a straight face that I've slept with tons of mid-level rappers. Not sexually, though. Like we were in the same bed in the hotel and went to sleep. I've never felt physically threatened by a man on tour, but I've never felt 100% safe either. That's a terrible reality lots of women artists endure on the road. The price of admission is way too high. But how else was I gonna blow up? This was the way to do it as an indie artist, hit the pavement. My early tours were such a mindfuck. We would go out for a week or so or do one-offs. That means traveling to do one show, then coming right back home. I found myself drifting so much at work after getting a taste of that life. Being back at the chemistry lab with its omnipresent smells of baking cheese and rotting beef and the occasional new fast food item. We tested Mickey D's McGriddles before they entered the marketplace, as well as a new mayo recipe Burger King was trying out. This was losing the luster it once had. I wasn't making nearly as much money touring at first, and my pay at the lab was good, but my post-college goals were rapidly morphing from beakers into beats, from solvents to stages. I started to get it real bad for the road. Working diligently with Nacrobats on the moonlighting tip gave me access to a lot of other like-minded creatives. Overflow, a producer, along with some Nacro affiliates, had given me beats during my last semester at U of I. Everyone I knew wanted Overflow beats, and he and I quickly became friends. We were both complete goofs and had a blast working together. We would also nerd out on music often, hang out with our partners together, and have long talks about what we could accomplish if given the chance. His ambition was attractive to me, and his approach to production and different soundscapes made me a quick believer in his ability to take my art to the next level. Overflow was a godsend. He just wanted to make the best song. That was it. He truly wanted to craft the best beats and help musicians thrive. It wasn't all competition and machismo with him. He never made me feel unsafe or uncomfortable. God really looked out for me by aligning us. He pushed me to think about the movement of a composition and the creation of a full body of work. He also challenged me to never go into the vocal booth with notes or lyrics. He wanted me to always have my stuff memorized. He wanted me to work on breath control and presence always. He was really a hip-hop A&R, artist and repertoire guy without the title or the pay. Circa 2004, we started working on my first full-length album since Biochemistry. Because of my mini buzz, we decided to give fans some new music while we took our time on this new album. I was about to sell out of the 1,000 copies of Biochemistry and would then have no more music to sell. And I wasn't even close to finishing my new stuff. Overflow suggested we make a deluxe-ish updated version of the album and call it a sequel. At the time, I thought it was a brilliant idea. Streaming was not a thing yet, so the only way people got to experience the album was if they actually bought it. It was time for new tunes. We ended up taking Biochemistry, removing our 5 least favorite songs and adding 5 brand new songs. We called it Biochemistry 2, Esters and Essays. At that point, my life consisted of going from one lab to another. An ester is a chemical compound, and certain types of esters are used in synthetic flavors, cosmetics, and perfumes. The title was fitting. My chemistry degree and my work at the food lab were fully present in my music. These themes pop up here and there, along with glimpses into my spirituality. I guess you can call me one of those church kids. So many artists who grew up in church practicing Christianity have a running theme of God in their music, even if it's not fully intentional. Even if we were full-on sinners, God has a sneaky way of popping up in our lyrics. Another running theme in my music is ambition. I always have something to prove, as if being a good artist just isn't good enough for me. As if having fans who love my stuff isn't quite enough. I don't know why that is. It just is. It felt like Overflow and I were creating music at 100 miles an hour. He was making a ton of music at the time and starting his own rap label. We were a lot alike in that we both rather go to the studio than the club. We'd rather argue about music than anything else. He'd promised me during a blood sacrifice that he'd give me his best beats. True story. Just kidding about the blood sacrifice, though. It was probably more like a beer sacrifice. I really wanted to have an edge over my peers with this next album. That was always in the back of my mind. So we promised each other we'd always put our absolute best foot forward with these records. The song A Girl Named You came about like many other songs. I would climb the seemingly endless narrow staircase up to Overflow's top floor, 2-bedroom spot in Uptown, a neighborhood on Chicago's north side. In the summer, it would be sweltering, and in the winter, we would be melting because of all of these seasonal layers of clothing. Needless to say, it was usually hot in his home studio. He'd be playing beats, I'd be smoking weed. He had this thing where he would play a particularly good beat, but only like 4 seconds of it. He would tease the shit out of me with this music, making me virtually beg for it. When he played the instrumental to what became the intro track on Biochemistry 2, there was no shame in my game. Whoa, play that again. What was that? This beat was for Slug, but I never heard anything back from him. Okay, so I can have it. Just play it again. Overflow played a quick snippet and immediately shut it off, laughing the whole time. Asshole, I need that beat. I don't know, Psalm. What if Slug calls me back? Overflow. He's not calling you back. Give me that beat and watch what I do with it. A soulful bass line looped under these airy church boy synths and took me right back to Sunday and wooden pews. And I don't mean the church days when I was in the closet questioning everything. I mean the church days when I couldn't wait to dress up and praise Jesus. My name ain't biblical for nothing. Jesus is my homeboy. I remember being so spoiled as a tiny kid. My mom and aunts always brought me nice, expensive dresses, and I needed somewhere to wear them. My mother's mother, Pinky, rarely missed church, and on my father's side, the story was similar. It's interesting to note that both of my grandmothers lived right next door to their respective churches. Like you could look out of the window and see church. It was never far away. My first rap name was Kizzy Tangents, but I got my first big press as Psalm 1, so I ran with this name. In the Bible, Psalm means a hymn. I think it's a beautiful name. At my most arrogant, I think my songs are personal hymns. It fits, and church is never too far away, and I could be such a Christian. The church influence, A Girl Named You, is the perfect beginning to Esther's and Essays. The first sound you hear is my emphatic and melodic request for y'all to wait a minute, because I'm going to bring it home. The feeling I get when this album starts is joy. I try to capture that feeling with a lot of my intro songs, but this one was so special to Overflow and me. After the request, I launched into a story about the first time I got saved, the first time, during Sunday service at my uncle's church. At the time, my uncle, by marriage, and my aunt, my mother's sister, were full-on pastors at a church I attended as a teenager. Getting saved basically meant you believed Jesus died for your sins and then told everyone about it. It meant repenting and rejoicing that your soul was rescued from eternal damnation. It meant a long day on the pews. My uncle and aunt were very persuasive. This sounds crazy, but those two could really preach their asses off. Forgive me, Lord, but that's the only way I can describe it. One particular Sunday in the early 1990s, my uncle was on a quest for souls at his tiny storefront church on the far south side near Corliss High School in Chicago. There were folding chairs instead of pews at this church, but we still called them pews, and God was definitely there. I had a handful of cousins I sat by every Sunday, and we were captivated by our uncle's sermons. His cries for us heathens definitely stirred my soul. I wanted to accept Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. I wanted to turn away from sin and live a holy life. As the call for miscreants rang out through the hall, I felt compelled to stand up and give my life to the Lord. I walked up to the altar with tears streaming down my chubby cheeks while the congregation exploded in wild, approving yelps. Yes, baby, give your life to him. Amen, amen, amen. Praise Jesus. My God is good. The elder church mothers surrounded me as my uncle palmed my head firmly yet lovingly. He prayed for my soul as my mother stood in the audience clapping and nodding. Elaine was never one to scream and holler in church. She was a crier. She was crying more than I was as I surrendered to this Baptist ritual. Felt good in my soul, and the love I felt by the congregation after church was something inexplicably awesome. My family was super proud of me, and I was glowing with that Jesus glow. I buckled. I gave it all to him, full of sin with a grin in my childish ways. I chuckled, paved the way for grimacing when I couldn't sit with my Bible. Wait a minute. Forgive me, Father. I've altered from the true calling of a good Christian. I sin and I don't bother. From a girl named you. Though this feeling didn't last and it wasn't the last time I got saved, the first verse of A Girl Named You describes this particular Sunday and how it felt. When I listen to it, I can close my eyes and be in that folding chair, my virgin soul weeping for acceptance. The second verse is the acknowledgement of divine protection throughout my life. It's also the acceptance of constantly falling short of the glory of God. I have been a liar and a sinner and a fornicator. By 2004, I had plenty to repent for. So I figured I'd do it in a song. This track adds religious depth for the first time to my catalog, and it thickens my overall plot. Praise God. Little miracles were happening in my career, and I was getting the opportunity to take my show on the road even more. A couple of out-of-town rap excursions proved I had what it took to please hip-hop fans outside of my comfort zone. A few pieces of great local press proved I had what it took to at least go beyond the city limits of Chicago. I wanted to quit my job at Silica Laboratories so bad. On the surface, my relationship with Meg was doing okay, but my ego was out of control. What I now recognize as very real anger issues started popping up more frequently. I was always just so anxious about music, money, and stability, and I wanted it all right now. Meg was a down-ass chick, but even she would get sick of my shit, and we would mouth off at each other. She had a spicy way with words and was a bit of a control freak, so arguments were inevitable. She was also simultaneously frightened and fascinated by my trajectory. I was a nightmare to deal with when I was intoxicated, and I talked about my career all the time. I was also frequently absent. Weird hours at the food laboratory, plus my moonlighting gave us less and less quality time together. I was taking every show or recording session I could in my spare time, and when I did stay at home, I was getting high. My normal vice was weed, but at this point, I was slowly reintroducing a bit of cocaine. It wasn't close to being an everyday thing yet, but I would occasionally get up with my old pal Susie, and we'd party all night. Or Meg and I would throw a fancy dinner party and invite people to come melt their faces off with drugs and alcohol after meals were consumed. Meg always had a better handle on her vices than I did, while I would get obliterated at parties, mostly for lack of knowledge of my tolerance levels. She would be seemingly okay. Our bond was stronger than the party and bullshit, but little did I know the partying and bullshitting was gaining traction in my life. Toward the end of my career as a food chemist, I had all but checked out. I wasn't as meticulous with my testing as I was at the beginning of my employment. I never got written up, but I was called into my supervisor's office a time or two. Everyone at work knew I was a rapper, and it was awkward. I reassured lab management I wasn't going to quit, but I was planning my escape every second. I didn't know how or when, but I couldn't wait to leave that place. It was only a matter of time before I burned my lab coat and gave the biggest middle finger to that job. My days were numbered. Those early tours were some of the happiest in my life. Looking out into the vast expanses of the U.S., from strip malls to cornfields to mountain ranges, eating gas station snacks, and putting my stamp on indie hip-hop with my rap pals was really a dream come true. Thinking of words, putting them to beats, and being able to grab a mic and recite those words on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people is an insane concept. Many artists say the most addictive drug is fame, and I fully understand why they would say that. You can be somebody different if that's your thing. People generally love you. Nobody knows who you really are. They only know what you say to them, what you rap to them, and they're mostly paying you to rap. Depending on the person in the audience, their feelings about you being on stage in front of them could range from indifference to worship. And I do mean worship. I've been called a deity for simply rapping. And now, while I deny anything of the sort, if an artist isn't careful, all the adulation can get them into trouble. But for now, this was some good trouble, some dreams being fulfilled. Even if some of the guys in the vehicle were complete dicks, that was a small price to pay. At least I had overflow in my corner. That's the end of chapter 6.
You ready for some questions?
Sure.
So if anybody has a question, just please wait until I come to you with the microphone because we are streaming this online and we want the folks watching at home to be able to hear you. So do we have anybody, a brave soul who wants to start? Otherwise, I'll jump in. I'll take the opportunity. You alluded to this a little bit, and particularly toward the end, talking about the job that you had as a chemist. But I wondered if you could share a little bit more, because it's an interesting journey for you getting into that job and the kind of juggling act that you were doing internally about, you really wanted to rap, but you wanted a steady job, and how all that played out.
So this is chapter 6. So I definitely explain all that in the book. But for the question now, I fell in love with hip hop in high school, but I also fell in love with chemistry in high school, and I was good at it. So I got a scholarship to the University of Illinois, became a chemist, but before I graduated from the University of Illinois, I actually released my first album. So that was already, I was already kind of a professional rapper before I became a chemist. So when I got my job at the lab, that was after putting rap down for a little bit. So as soon as I got a steady job, I picked rap back up. And I was young enough to only get 4 hours of sleep a night. It would be something like I would wake up around 4. I would wake up around 2 if I went to sleep at all. I'd get to the lab at 4. I'd work an 8-hour shift, go home, I'd sleep for maybe an hour, and then I'd get up and rap. And that was a time that was very, very challenging and hard. But I was still in my 20s. I was still really young, and I was able to do it. I couldn't dream of doing something like that now. But it was 2 full-time jobs at that time.
Quite a juggling act, so yeah.
You mentioned in your reading of chapter 6, being in these environments that were highly patriarchal, highly sexist. How did you find peace for yourself while navigating these environments?
I don't think I had much peace. I think I found it, later on. But peace wasn't something that even occurred to me to have. It was more about, for me, proving something. But also, there were things that I wasn't willing to do. The music business is it's kind of evil, you know what I mean? But everyone in it isn't. So it's about finding the people who support you or down to work with you. But I mean, as you heard in the reading, I was doing drugs. So for me, sometimes doing drugs was just keeping me social. Because I'm actually, I'm an only child. I know how to be alone, and I know how to entertain myself. And sometimes I'm just not the most social. But being a rapper means, hey, life of the party, So for me, it was about keeping up appearances for a long time. And peace wasn't something I craved until it was almost too late, until things start going wrong, And then you're like, wait, hold on, where's the peace? And then you have to start, looking for that.
Have any other questions from the audience in the room? Yeah.
Can you talk about being from Chicago and whether that's affected your art? Or I'm from Chicago too.
Nice.
So.
Well, Chicago has some from multi-genre icons. I mean, from Buddy Guy to, in hip hop we have so many. Kanye, Common, Chance the Rapper. I mean, it's been interesting being from Chicago as a rapper, because up until 2012, there weren't multiple rappers getting the national spotlight. There wasn't a flood of artists being celebrated. It was usually one at a time. So for me, as far as growing up in Chicago, that there's something in the water there as far as musicians go. I mean, we even have Smashing Pumpkins, Wilco, across the board, we have great musicians. And for me, that was great, because as far as in the 90s, everyone was sampling records a million miles a minute. So just even getting immersed into some of the songs and some of the music that we sampled. It made us better musicians. For me, growing up in a household where my mother played top 40 in the 80s and 90s, that meant that's some of the best pop music we have. 80s and 90s pop music is chef's kiss. So I grew up with that. I also grew up with a lot of soul music. My mom did Motown real heavy. So, just growing up in a household like that. And then as I got older, being able to go see shows of just world-class musicians and artists, and some being even from Chicago, it made me spoiled. I think Chicagoans are crazy spoiled when it comes to live music and just who the artists we've been able to churn out.
Oh, can I get you? Yeah, right here.
What changes do you see, especially in the underground, like in the landscape of hip hop, since the boycott and like since the fire has like died down? Like, what do you see personally that still stands since the boycott?
Boycotting a huge rap label was, you were there. It was. You're tearing down something, right? If I'm boycotting something, I'm tearing it down. So for me, I just left Minneapolis. We boycotted Rhymesayers in 2020. I just left Minneapolis a few months ago. So I stayed to rebuild. I'm gonna keep it honest with you. A lot of people just hid. And for those of you who don't know, I talk about it a lot in the book. I was signed to a label who just didn't treat me well. I said that in 2015 and got canceled. And then 2020, their treatment of other people and their treatment of other artists and even fans, it was so bad. There were rape allegations. There were all kinds of stuff. And it was so messy that people actually came back around to what I said in 2015, and then they started believing me. It gave me validation, and it gave me strength to continue the call-outs. And really, it was all about accountability. And there wasn't much. There were a lot of artists who are affiliated with Rhymesayers, Doomtree, Stop House, that just hid or pretended to care. And for me, as a woman, and seeing what women and femme-bodied people and queer people go through in these backstage areas, see what women go through when a rapper violates them and then everyone sides with the rapper, it's tough. And for me, I don't want the next generation to have to go through what we went through. So I had to call them out. It was important to me. And I had backup this time. And I had the truth on my side. And I have receipts. So it was, I think the boycott did what it was supposed to do, which was more about exposing. It's stupid to think that an iconic hip-hop label is just going to crumble because you said something bad about them, or that they're going to stop rapping or stop doing shows or stop doing what they've done for 20, 30 years. It's stupid to think that. But they got to move different now, and that's important. And you can't just walk around Minneapolis thinking you're the shit just because you're affiliated with these people, because the affiliation means something different now. And if we can get it back to rap, that'd be amazing. I think it's time for Minneapolis in particular to prop up. You've been there, so much talent. There's so much talent. There's no lack of talent. It just needs to be a changing of the guards. I can't do it. I'm 40 plus. I'm too old. You know what I mean? I can't do it. I can just give out gems and help facilitate what's next. Minneapolis is in a transitional period. I think that there are a lot of artists trying to figure out what they want to do. I think there are a lot of collectives coming up. And I think there are a lot of people building, but you don't build another Rhymesayers in a year. You know what I mean? And who knows if they want another big entity? I think it's a good time for unknown artists and artists who, weren't on that clout train, yet, to really just show up. And I'll be there. I mean, I have a mutual aid organization that I started in 2020 in response to the George Floyd uprisings. But then we also did so much survivor work, because once I said what I said and started, talking about survivors in hip hop, I had to open up my doors. I had to sit with many, many people and talk with them about this stuff. So for me, my personal work in Minneapolis will never be done, but it's not up to me. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, no. And like you said, like stopping it for like the next generation.
Yeah.
I think that that's like the longest standing thing that's going to change from all of that. I think that whole next generation, everything's going to be different than what we all did, and what we all went through.
And those kids know the bad stuff now. They just don't know the good stuff. So the kids are all right. I think they don't walk around just holding these people up because they were able to rap and tour. Like, we're just people, man,
All right, great. We got a question over here.
Do you want me to hold it or? So many of the top women rappers sort of take on this hypersexual persona and look. And while I think it's great to talk about women talking about their own sexuality, it does seem to perpetuate this sexist environment that you talk about. And I'm wondering, especially for young women coming up, how do you create a path for someone who wants to do something different than perpetuate these stereotypes?
Yeah.
It's not just hip hop, I realize.
No, absolutely. The mainstream music industry, it is really difficult for a woman to push through who isn't like hot, right? And while the future is female for rap, and I feel like many women rappers are dominating right now, the ones that are pushed through to us still perpetuate the shenanigans. And while I think it's absolutely fine for a woman to show what you want to show, do what you want to do, but if it's because you know that that's what's going to get you further, then that doesn't change much. But also there are plenty of women who are not overly sexual. I think that hip-hop is the foundation of hip-hop is like misogyny and almost like a fantasy world for dudes. And we have endured decades of dudes talking about their dicks and their sexual prowess and all that stuff. And honestly, I read something on Twitter the other day, because that's like my favorite place in the world, is how men don't necessarily want to listen to women being strong and powerful, right? I feel like sometimes men don't want to see a super strong, dominating woman telling him he ain't shit, Even though rappers are huge in telling us that we ain't shit, and we just dance to it. But women have had to kind of have this cognitive dissonance. Like, for me to enjoy hip-hop for my entire life, I've literally had to have cognitive dissonance as I've gotten older, because I'm like, well, I am not a bitch. I am not a slut. I am not a whore. You know what I mean? I'm just like, they're not talking about me. But the mainstream has a lot of work to do. Women have definitely been at the forefront, I think, for a few years of some of the more exciting rap. Queer voices, too, have been pretty exciting. But it takes for the masses to catch up. And I mean, the music business has to have a complete overhaul to accept more women who don't fit that status, super sexy quo.
Got a question back here.
You kind of touched on it, the subjects that you rap on. I was going to ask you maybe to tell us what some of those are. Mm-hmm. And then what advice can you give to us dumb white people who can't understand the rap?
Right.
I don't listen to it much because I can't understand it. That's just my own failing.
Quick plug, buy my album after this. But for me, traditionally, I've always just spoken about my life. I'm definitely a more autobiographical rapper. I speak about, earlier in my career, I was literally just trying to show you how great I am with words. So there's a lot of wordplay there. There's a lot of me showboating, showing like, I have a chemistry degree and I rap. Look how smart I am. And I think it was important for me to show more intellectualism in what I was doing, just because it wasn't, I come from Chicago where there's a lot of different rappers. So I do have people like Open Mike Eagle as a peer, who was like one of the smarter rappers I've ever heard. But we also have Chief Keef, and we also have, we have Lucky. You don't know these people, so it's just like these examples don't necessarily mean much. But for me, I rap about now what I've been through, getting over trauma. My latest album, Big Perm, I call it Big Perm because it's like a straightening. And for me, it's talking about a lot of the things that I overcame in this. I have a song about battling demons and accepting the fact that they're not going anywhere and what you do with those. I have a song about My very, very toxic relationship with my partner that we have overcome. I talk about drug addiction and getting over that. I have a song called Shadow Work, which I'm talking about really looking deep within myself, having accountability about the things that aren't too cool about myself. And I think that runs opposite to a lot of what rappers talk about. Rappers are really good at talking about the best parts of themselves. Look at me, I'm so great, grandstanding. But this latest album for me is really talking about the ways in which I am not so great and the ways in which I'm trying to fix that.
And just a little plug. Psalm brought some
Oh yeah, I got
vinyl and
vinyl
some
CDs
CDs with
and
her to
socks.
sell. So
Come
afterward,
see me later.
highly recommended. One question I had, several times in the book, there are kind of cautionary tales about things that you went through as, a younger artist or even more established in your career. And you actually say, hey, young artists reading this, pay attention. Did you see that, or was that a motivation for you as you were writing to share that story, not just to let everyone know, but specifically artists who might be coming up behind you, don't make the mistakes I've made or don't take these paths?
I'm from a city where a lot of people hoard information, and they'll just watch you flail and know that you're flailing and have an idea how you cannot flail and still not help. I don't want to be that. I want to be known for if there's a gem that I have that I can pass, I'm going to do it. For me, Jay-Z has a couple lyrics that I remembered while writing this book, and one was, Hove did that, so hopefully you wouldn't have to go through that. Basically saying, like, the mistakes that I've made, I'm going to tell you about them, so maybe you can, like, learn from them. And another one is show you how to move in a room full of vultures, which is, like, recognizing who's here for you and who's not. And I remember there was another thing that you said that I didn't answer. It's about deciphering rap lyrics. There's some rap lyrics I still have yet to decipher, Sometimes it's really just about the feeling of it. I don't always understand depending on what kind of rapper they are. Like drill rappers and stuff, I don't know all the slang. I'm older now, so I don't know all the like youthful slang coming out. But I try to understand what the main message is. But yeah, there are rappers that speak clearly and speak in really simple terms, and it's not that hard to understand. But you have to find them. And a lot of the mainstream artists that we're given right now and that are pushed through to us right now, you're not necessarily gonna understand it. And a lot of people rap very, very fast. So that's kind of it.
Other questions? Yeah, we've got one over here.
What was it like to make that transition from like writing like song lyrics to like writing a memoir? Was it challenging? Was there any like interesting changes that you noticed?
Absolutely. I mean, my manuscript was 100,000 words. And I mean, that's like several albums. That's so many albums, So for me, I didn't take it like that. When I first pitched my book and it got picked up, we set a deadline, when this first, draft was going to be due. I started off just kind of trying to write a chapter a week. But once those deadlines started to hit, I had to write 1,000 words a day. And 1,000 words a day seems like a lot. But if you do it for 2-3 weeks, it gets easier. It is really just like a muscle thing. I had a lot to say in this book, and for me, it was more about getting my thoughts out in a formulaic way. I literally am a chemist, so formulas and time management are things that I like really thrive at. So I was able to set a schedule for myself that wasn't too crazy. It was actually what was really hard were the edits. After I first wrote the book, it was like I believe I finished the first manuscript in early 2020, right before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic hit, and I had so much time to edit. It was not a big deal. It was like, oh, I can edit anytime. I'm not doing anything. I'm never leaving this house. But then after 2020 happened, George Floyd happened, and then the boycott my friend just spoke of, there was a lot more to talk about. So my book was essentially done before all that stuff happened. And then I had to go back in and be like, wait, there's so much more to talk about. And I got an extension on the deadline because of that. But because of that, I started, and you'll read it in the later chapters, there's a lot of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, mental health issues, things like that I had to write about. So I had to take mental health breaks. So that I think that was the biggest thing. Like when I finish an album, it's done, you know? When you finish a book, it's not really finished until another couple months. I went through 2 huge edits with 2 huge editors, and it took months and months. So from the time we said, yeah, we're gonna write this book to the time it came out, it took almost 3 years. So it is a much, much more intense process for me than any of the music that I've made.
Yeah, come back over here for a question.
What future issues do you want to deal with in your upcoming literary work?
So my next book, I have to live a few more years, I think. But I was thinking about the aftermath of writing something so personal. People not knowing a lot of things in my life that they know now. My mom, my grandmother, there are certain family members who are like looking at me funny, you know? There are certain friends who are looking at me more deeply. People were understanding a lot what I went through during the times where, you know, I was struggling in my career. I think it adds so much depth to my life and my music that that's just so much for the first book. So yeah, I think my upcoming literary work, I might do some fiction, and if I ever write, you know, a memoir type thing again, it would be there would be some chapters about dealing with the aftermath of writing this first book.
Interpretation of interpretation.
You're very meta.
Now that you're thinking about that, when you get ideas for ways to express yourself, are you thinking this could be a song, this could be fiction, this could be nonfiction? I mean, now you have more avenues now than you did before. Do you think about that when you're thinking about expression?
Yeah, I have a few ideas. I have a TV script that I'm writing. Who knows what will happen with that, but I'm writing it. Writing a book let me know, like, oh, I can write more stuff. So for me, it's just been fun experimenting with that. As far as songs go, I have the people in place that I work with, so I already kind of know, okay, we're doing music today. But as far as like the ideas that come in my head, I have a notes app that's chock full of all kind of little things. Sometimes I write something, I'll be like, that could be a bar of a song, you know, that could be a line of a rap. But if it's a bigger idea, I try to like open that up and say, oh, maybe that could be a blog post, or maybe that could be a chapter. So, you know, I'm very much compartmentalizing the ideas, but the only thing I'm focused on right now is music.
Great. All right, got a question back here.
Yes, how do you even get started on either writing a song or a book or a fiction or nonfiction piece? I mean, if you have the ideas, I mean, I've written like one line and then that's as far as I get. How do you even get started or proceed with it?
I started off writing poetry, really bad poetry, actually. And it took me years to get to a point where I felt comfortable writing raps. I feel like I'm blessed with a God-given talent because I don't think I was ever in a position where I was rapping in my early days and someone was like, you don't ever rap again, and you're terrible. I think I think writing out your thoughts as a means of expression is one of the more beautiful things you can do. You say you write a line and then you stop. Write 2 lines next time. And if it sucks, so what? That's the thing, too. Like, it doesn't matter if it sucks, you know? Like, just keep doing it, and you'll get better at it just like with anything else. But for me, you know, going from a poetry kid to just a rapper kid was pretty natural. And I always wrote a lot as a kid, so that was just a pretty organic thing.
Have any other questions from folks here in the room? Okay, great.
Are you sure?
This is your one last chance to talk with Psalm. Actually, it's not, because
No,
you
it's
stick
not.
around.
Yeah, I'm gonna be right there.
Great. All right. Well, okay, we'll get one last question here.
I mean, so do you keep in mind your beginning, your middle, and your conclusion then when you start, or what?
With a rap, or? I think the beauty of my stuff now is in the edit. So because I wrote this book and it went through such a grueling editing process, it helped my music in that I never really keep the first thing that I write anymore, where I used to keep the first thing that I write. Like now I go through at least like 2-3 edits, and realizing that less is more. As a rapper, I've always been, if you're familiar with my catalog, I'm very verbose, and there was a part of, like, there was an era in my rap career where, like, it was just as fast as I could go, as much words as I can, like, fit into a bar. Now I'm learning how to say more with less.
Sounds like a fitting point to end on. So,
And scene.
yeah. All right, please help me welcome Psalm 1, or not welcome, thank. We've already welcomed it, to thank Psalm 1 for today.
Thank y'all for coming. I really appreciate it.